So it begins.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Stooges in Middle Earth. I'm Smitty, and I'm joined by my best buddy, Nick. Nick, how are you doing today?
I am doing good. I am looking forward to talking about some Lord of the Rings.
Fantastic. To fill everybody in, this show is intended to be a supplemental podcast to our more broader podcast, Strategy Game Stooges, where in this podcast, we'll dive into what we're most passionate about, Middle Earth strategy battle game. Is that true for you, Nick?
Oh, yeah. There's nothing better than running around on a battlefield with Aragorn and slaying some orcs, you know?
I know it sure is for me. I mean, I started playing what seems like ages ago, not quite as long as the first 3 ages, but, at least 17 years ago, right? And about 7th grade, which is pretty close to when the game actually started coming out. My first ever set that I actually collected was the original Return of the King box set. Back in those days, I was at the mercy of cutting lawns to afford models, and after looking into some of the gardening stuff like Samwise Gamgee, it literally was not cutting it for me, and I had to take a break from actually playing. But fast forward 10 years, I was actually about to sell most of my models, and one day I went over to Nick's house just to show off what I had, and I think I took over the Mines of Moria set. And Nick, what happened then?
Well, a lot of money got spent after that moment. I'll tell you that.
It sure did. We jumped right back in, didn't we? We could almost say I was there and back again.
Yeah, you definitely were. I wasn't, though, okay? I was more or less, Bilbo or Frodo starting on an adventure. I didn't even know what it was. Probably more Bilbo than anything, because at least Frodo had Bilbo that he knew about.
That is true. And the other thing is as we, get older and get more money, and it just kind of, you're able to buy the toys you could never get, because back in 7th grade, I really wanted the 2 Tower set, and I was really hoping to get it for Christmas one year, and Santa didn't show up for me. So, but fast forward, and I got one, and I got one sitting in my drawer collecting dust that I haven't even put together yet, sitting on it. So
I even ended up. Which one did I get? Was it Return of the King?
Yeah, you came across a steal.
Yeah.
You got a Return of the King box set for free. You got it from some, I don't know, Craigslist.
Yeah, I think it was Craigslist.
Like
it was some people that their kids had long moved out, and they were just selling some of their stuff. I ended up taking a bunch of stuff home, stuff I didn't necessarily want, but the main thing was going down there for that box set, which was, I think, maybe a couple of the models had been attempted to paint, but for the most part, it was pretty much brand new.
Yes, that is fantastic, and that's kind of how we then got your brother involved. And I mean, he's doing all sorts of other stuff now, but
yeah, he moved on more to he still does the Lord of the Rings, but he's big into the Star Wars Legion, which he's got me into a little bit. Even though I painted the models, you've played more games on that than I have, because I've only played the one. Because I mostly stuck to the Lord of the Rings, which is my favorite. Yeah, so we've had quite a few games over the last couple of years now. I think we had to change those slightly, because when we first started out, we thought everything had to be a huge epic, and
yeah,
there's only so many models, it turns out, that you can actually fit on a table and still have your sanity of moving after one turn.
Isn't that right? Yeah, we found battle companies to be much more manageable.
Yeah, and even then,
I think there was an afternoon we got in 8 or 10 games, something like that.
But even then, it just started out, because when we first did it, all we thought we had to do was play with every model we had, which with the box sets you kind of could, but then once you started adding in more of those box sets, that's when it got harder, because then it would just take hours and hours and hours to play the game, which was fun, but there gets a time that you want to cut it back. So it wasn't until they pretty much re-released the game is when we all of a sudden the rules started making more sense, I would say. And then that's when it's actually been a lot better, because we've been able to get in some of the games that are a little bit manageable, but still you get that nice big battle feel to them. So that's been a lot of fun.
Yes, I gotta say, from when I played years ago to this newer edition, the rules have been written so much better. That is just so much better to understand. And speaking of which, it's quite the day to start this, right? Because the newest and latest and greatest FAQs and the errata came out today for all the different books. So maybe we should dig in and talk about some of that. I know you haven't quite read it
No,
yet, but I've been following on Facebook. You know, the uh, Great British Hobbit League and things like that, and they've been making fun of the FAQs here and there. So I got a little bit
I did
of the gist of
briefly
what's
see
changing.
there were some memes that were getting put out on it. I didn't get a chance to read it because I've been at work today. I didn't get a chance, but I did see some of the memes. So yeah, I'm excited to hear some of the new stuff because from my understanding, the bits that I read is they didn't totally go back and get rid of some of the rules that should have been deleted. So as you go through, I'm going to see if that's what the word on the street was that I picked up in my limited amount, that they added stuff without removing stuff. So I'm kind of interested to see if that's the
Right.
case.
I saw Shadowfax was getting some flack because it seemed like people were trying to use his will to cast magic spells with Gandalf, and that's not necessarily the case. They kind of broke down more to where if the whole model's getting affected by something, Shadowfax can kind of use some of his will to make sure that that effect does not happen to the whole model or to Shadowfax. But if something's happening directly to Gandalf, Gandalf cannot actually use Shadowfax's will. So that was one of the bigger ones that people were talking about today. Also, they institute actually in the rule book and the profiles for say the men faction, right? So you also have woman in there, right? And obviously, as we know, that I am no man, you know.
Okay.
But there's actually certain things that say affects a man keyword. They also say affects man and woman now. So yeah, that was one of the main ones. And then there was another one. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh, yeah. So here, I'll actually read the question. So there's a question in there that was from the last errata, and then there's a question in here from the current errata, and it's right next to each other. So the first question is, can Sam use his let him go or I'll have you special rule to declare a heroic combat if he is in the same combat as Frodo? And the answer was yes, though he will still have to move closer to Frodo, as close to Frodo as possible, but will often result in him not moving at all, which makes sense to me. And then the second question right below it says, can Samwise Gamgee use his let him go or I'll have you declare a free heroic combat if he is already in the same combat as Frodo? And then it said no. The answer was no. So the thing that was funny was the first one said "Can Sam" and the second one "Can Samwise Gamgee." So Facebook just ate that up.
Yeah, that's I believe the one that I saw the meme for. That's where also I believe I looked that up, and I believe the one that's in gray is supposed to be. I thought I had read that Jay Clare had said that one is supposed to be deleted, but they never did it, and it should be only the pink one. But yeah, that was confusing because that was the only one that I saw today, because I saw the meme and what is everybody talking about, because I didn't get a chance, like I said, to open up the whole document. But I was reading that and it was not making sense to me because I kept reading the thing and it's literally the exact same thing, and one's yes, one's no, so that was confusing to me. But I guess I can't even remember now the models for Sam. Is there a model that's only Sam, and is there one that's Samwise? Do you think that's part of the confusion?
There's yeah, I have to look, but I know there's one called Samwise the Brave, right? But I think that just means that's Sam.
Yeah.
But, I'll have to double check on that one. But that's another good point, is that with so many books out now, there's so much to dig through, right? So you got the errata and designer commentary for the rule book, the Armies of the Hobbit, the the armies of the Lord of the Rings, right? The match play guide, the battles companies, the Gondor at War, the Scourging the Shire, War in Rohan, and the Quest of the Ring Bearer, right? And that is a lot to put together, and that just shows me like I'm so happy that they are actually paying attention to Middle Earth strategy battle game again, and I just hope it keeps going. And with the new movie, with the new Amazon show coming out, I cannot wait to see if they have the licensing rights to create new models, and I'm just so excited.
Yeah, that's one that I'm interested in as well. I've been trying to keep track of it, but I don't think anybody totally knows yet, or if the people that do know, I don't think they're totally releasing what knowledge they have, because I do see that show, especially with it coming to Amazon, you have a huge platform to get new people into Lord of the Rings and new characters. So I would really like to be able to see new stuff put into the game. They're already doing a great job. The fact that they rebooted the game in a sense was something that I was never expecting them to do. So that's cool in and of itself. But then to have the show, and there's also, I've seen reports that there's a movie about the rise of Morgoth, I believe is what I saw.
Yeah, second age movie potentially.
So there's even more than just the show. They're showing interest in more movies, and I know that they had issues originally because when Peter Jackson made the movies, the Tolkien estate wasn't real happy. But they had already sold the rights, so they did the movies. They did The Hobbit, which was kind of... The Hobbit movies get a bad rap, but when you consider how much going into those, it was all kind of rushed because Peter Jackson wasn't the first guy assigned where he jumped in. But it's just, I didn't know with all this stuff that had gone through, in a sense, it seemed like nothing would ever happen again. But now they're finally opening it up to the TV show. Now there's reports of another movie. So I really hope that adding this stuff will kind of help reinvigorate and keep people going with Games Workshop thinking, all right, if they can get these rights, they have so much more new material. Whereas now they have some of the material is new, but a lot of it's kind of just rehashing, which I'm not complaining about because there's some new model, like the models that are bringing out are models that I want. So that's not a complaint in any way, shape, or form. It's awesome to have that. But it would be really cool to start seeing new stuff, maybe bring new players that are starting with it, with this new stuff, would then come at it thinking, oh, I like this TV show, not realizing Lord of the Rings already has these movies out there because they've been out for a while, that I feel like there are some people not realizing what exactly is encompassed in the books and the movies.
Right, absolutely. And could you imagine if Lord of the Rings was created so like Marvel, right? So like could you imagine if Lord of the Rings was created like Marvel, where you had like the major battles being like, the Avengers, and then but you also had like the standalone movies for like the Gandalf movie or like the Aragorn movie, or like,
yeah, that would be cool.
Instead of the full, the trilogy, right? Obviously the trilogy is a work of art, but like, could you, I always think of like how kind of the Marvel movie, the way they came out with things kind of changed some of the ways that some content's being brought out to the consumers.
I think every movie out there, it seems, is trying to make their own cinematic universe, which is kind of cool because you get a lot more stuff in the universe. The only thing I'd be a little bit afraid with Lord of the Rings, myself personally, is that I think part of what makes the Lord of the Rings so cool is you only get a certain limited amount with, say, how we talked about Sam. Nobody would expect Sam. If somebody was to give you a synopsis of Lord of the Rings, how many people actually would use a character such as Sam in there? But when you actually start to consider what he does, it seems like he has such a minor role, but in reality, he's kind of, in a sense, he is like the biggest character of the book and movie. So my only thing would be I like the new stuff they're coming out with, but I personally like seeing the second age stuff more so than necessarily the third age stuff, just because I would rather learn stuff that hasn't necessarily been told than taking the stuff that's been told in such a nice way and just watering it down to the point like let's get the new stuff in here first. Let's bring some new fun stuff in before we go back and completely water down what we already have.
No, absolutely, and part of my excitement for all this is that as I've been painting recently, I've been listening to the Silmarillion, and I never really explored that part of Middle Earth before, and like kind of like before Arda was created and things like that, and it's almost biblical in the way that it's written, and it really gets you thinking. And I don't know how they would do it necessarily, but it'd be great um, to kind of build that bridge to all the way up to the third age, right? And I know the beginning of the Fellowship kind of talks about the second age a little bit, right? But it'd be really cool to actually watch the rings get forged and things like that.
Well, even that
And
helps
I
add to some of the stuff, because I forget where I read this, but it was something interesting. Somebody brought up an interesting point. So let's take when Gandalf, right, when he falls, when he's fighting the Balrog. Obviously,
yeah,
if you only know Lord of the Rings from the movies, which some people out there only know it from the movies, which is fine. Not everybody has read the books. I love the books. I think you should read the books, but yeah, sometimes it can be a hard read. But let's say you only old man that shows up with these hobbits and just has a good time with them, but you don't totally know what he's doing. You don't totally know his background. But when you consider, say, Legolas and Aragorn, they know who Gandalf is. They know that he's not just a friendly old guy that shows up and causes mischief in the Shire. So when they see him fall, it was something somebody brought up the point that it, in a sense, probably would have impacted them more, because it's almost to the point that it's like an angel that died.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And I did see, at least on the Great British Hobbit League kind of page, they were trying to figure out like what one of the Valor, would look like as a model and how they would act. And basically, they were saying that Sauron and the Balrog were like the closest models that we have currently to the Valar that created, or that helped create Middle Earth. And they were saying that it would be impossible to completely break the game just because of like how powerful. Basically, one of their special abilities would be like 25% of your force automatically dies.
Yeah, it would be. That's where you'd have to understand that it's a game, and even yeah, because even with, when you think about it, you play with Sauron, which I've had some bad experiences playing against him, because I just can't. I've killed him. I've had Faramir kill him. What did I kill in that one game? It seems like Daniel was playing with Sauron, and I killed with Faramir 10 times.
It had to be multiple times. Yeah. What's the reroll? He on his last wound, if he rolls a
It's
2
something
plus,
like a 2+, then he gets a wound back. It just felt like it was impossible to kill him. I was killing. Well, technically, I was killing him, but he just kept lingering. But Sauron's a pretty powerful character, so you would have to have some sort of a dynamic like that, where you have something so powerful. Understand it is a game. You can't have a unit that just wipes everything out, but you could still, because I do believe there'd be value in having the model on the table, because some people would like to see that. But just keep in mind that, okay, yeah, technically it's not as powerful as it should be, but what do you want? Either it's a model that you can't play because it's too powerful, or accept the fact that they nerf it a little bit so you can have it on the table and you get to enjoy seeing the model. Because to me, the part of the excitement, yeah, I like to win, I like to play, but in all reality, just seeing the stuff that I've painted, or seeing the stuff you or Daniel's painted, just having it all set up on the table and seeing us moving stuff around, that's part of the fun to me, is seeing all that stuff. I don't feel like I have to have it, so perfectly accurate. I just like seeing it. So I wouldn't be mind if that ends up having that. Just nerf the thing. Let's have it on the table. Let's see it. I'd like to see what it looks like.
Like to see what it would do. Yeah. No, I could play, and that's the whole. I mean, we haven't really played too many match games, right? We're kind of more the scenario kind of people, the narrative play, and to see if we can actually change the fate of Middle Earth, right? With we played a couple of games of the Gondor at War, and I'm currently going through all of the books, kind of lining up the kind of the Fellowship book to the Gondor at War and the Rohan and War, and I'm kind of going the movie route right now instead of the book route. But lining those battles up, and actually, I'm currently actually 3D printing some terrain to go with those scenarios, and starting with Farmer Maggot's crop, the first scenario of the new Fellowship supplemental book is what I'm currently working on. So I'm going piece by piece.
Just so anyone listening, look up the Smitty 3D. That's the Smithy, Smithy. I believe it's _3D for Instagram. And Etsy, I believe the Etsy store is just the Smithy 3D, no spaces, no underscores. Those are the best places to get a hold of you, correct, for some of the stuff you're printing?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm slowly creating my catalog. I like to make sure everything prints properly. I want to get a painted version of it. It also keeps me accountable for, painting my own things, right? So that's kind of the uh, business model that
The
I'm
best
looking
part
for.
about, you printing it is you're doing it because you enjoy it. So at the end of the day, you're going to take that extra step to make sure the quality's up there. It's not that it's not something putting food on your table. So I know you do it. I
Absolutely
know there's
right.
other guys that do it, but I think that's kind of cool to have that personal touch that you have that capability that you can take the little extra little extra step, to make sure what you get is something that you like yourself personally.
Yep, absolutely, and that's the motto. There is the best prints at the best price. That's what I try to do. So, no, I guess that's enough
Yeah.
promotion for me.
Got to
But
get you.
on all seriousness, it is so much fun to be able to take different Patreons that I follow and how they're even involved in some of the Middle Earth strategy battle game stuff. That's how big this is getting now. And it's just great to see what designs they come up with. Obviously, they can't quite due to the copyright limits as Games Workshop, but some of the stuff that's out there is definitely remarkable.
Yes, for sure. They are starting to slowly, even Games Workshop themselves are starting to get some more terrain out there.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a good point. So when I get these print files from the Patreons that I follow, it's interesting to see the scale, right? Because Lord of the Rings is a weird scale. Like they call it 28 millimeter, but it could be 20. It's like 25 millimeter, and then you got trolls and things like that that are just all over the place, right? So when I think about Lord of the Rings, I don't necessarily know what scale to use. It's a very grandiose scale, right? Like when you think of Minas Tirith, Helm's Deep, things like that, that would just be so big to recreate the true
Yeah.
scale of it. And I'm finding that these 3D files are actually a much larger scale than some of the stuff that Games Workshop's creating. I actually just looked at one of the Rohan houses that I built. We also have a YouTube video up of that. It's like a burned, pillaged Rohan house. You should check that out on our YouTube channel. But it's interesting that how small that scale is, because if you look at the doorways on that, technically a model would have to duck to go through that doorway, which is very interesting to think
Correct.
about.
All that stuff is odd because when you think about it, you look at a model like, say, Boromir. Boromir is supposed to be really tall. If you look back in the books, he's
Right.
supposed to be really tall. But then you compare him to some of the other stuff, it's pretty much everybody's the same height. Apart from, of course, a dwarf or a hobbit. So even with your saying
right.
like them, like
But
if you take a man, Boromir should be.
Yep.
The way a man of Gondor would fit, the same way, say, Boromir would fit, the same way an elf would fit. It's whatever they do, they have their scale, but then they must like merge it together because it just doesn't always jive.
Right, and it doesn't look bad either. Like when you're looking at, like, so for instance, like on Warhammer Community, if you look at the Rohan Village showcase when all the new Rohan terrain came out, right, and you look at the pictures, and they're pretty, like, they look really good. Like, may, maybe I mean I know, like, that's the thing, is that it's miniatures, right? So that it's not like actually true
Even with
scale, but
miniatures, because I'm sitting right now in my room here, where I'm doing my painting and everything, and I have Necrons sitting in front of me.
mm-hmm.
Then you compare the Necrons to some of the Middle Earth models, which I actually have right now. I have Gandalf on the cart, and the Gandalf on the cart compared to the regular Gandalf on a regular horse is a different scale, And that's the same character versus just a regular Gandalf model. So he's smaller for some reason. But then you take that, then I also have Star Wars Legion sitting here. And the Star Wars Legion is a different scale. So then I'm painting the Unmatched game, which those scales are different too. So it's odd that I do understand that from company to company, they're all going to do different, but it's just, to me, it's weird. Like, my big thing is, why do you have Gandalf on a cart? And I mean, like, look at this. You know, he's so smaller.
Yeah.
Like, this is Gandalf, and this Haradrim horse is pretty much the same size as the cart and horse together. But
I know that, but Gandalf's not really that much smaller, right?
It's a little bit smaller.
It's more a little bit smaller, but the horse is almost like a pony.
Yes, correct. Which may be the whole.
Right, and what is that on a 40 millimeter base? Is that like a normal cavalry base?
No, so this is the base.
That's bigger. That looks like almost a.
So this
60.
is, I believe, the cavalry base. And
that's a 40 millimeter. Yep.
This one is the size comparison of that.
That'd be the 60. That's what the trolls sit on. And a 60 millimeter base for the trolls, I believe. And then I think, so that's the Mordor trolls, right? But the cave trolls would sit at the 40 millimeter base, which is what all the other cavalry models sit on. So, which makes sense because a cavalry model is kind of like double wide of the 25 millimeter, which would be 50 millimeters then, right? So it that scale, and in essence, like that scale, like a infantry model to obviously a cavalry looks absolutely fine, but it's really the other thing you got to think about with the terrain is that the playability of it, right? Can a 25 millimeter base sit on top of the terrain where they're shooting over a ruin? Can the bow see over the terrain, right? Like you want to make sure that it's playable too, so you don't have all these line of sight issues. Because in my experience with our line of sight, we tend to bicker back and forth.
Yeah, it's correct. Because, it's weird, though, because when you think about it, if you're fighting, like, you look at any historical battle and understand it's a game, which is where it runs into, you have to find a fair value in between it. But, like, you have a battle, you're going to have guys shooting arrows. They know how to shoot an arrow up and over your front lines to keep going into the back ranks of the enemy without risking hitting somebody, which is where... That's where it kind of gets weird, where you take in line of sight. Well, you can't shoot because your guy's in front. You could hit him. Well, ideally in the real world, you're going to be able to shoot with enough of an arch to get over the guy, depending where he's at. But then it gets into the same thing with the terrain, because depending on what bow you have, you can't necessarily be right up tight to the fence where the model shows tight to the fence, because you have to have room to hold your bow, to draw it, and fire it. So then that's where it kind of gets weird. But yeah, I do like when you have terrain. I feel like it should be somewhat easy, that you look at it and there's no argument as far as can you shoot over it with the in the way type tests,
Right. So with a lot of the things that I've been printing, they're good for 28 millimeter play, right? But I've actually been taking them down to 25 millimeter to see if they work. And then potentially like in between the 28 to the 25 for bases and things like that, if they can get through like the cracks and crevices. And that's kind of what I've been keeping it at to one, limit my print times, right? And two, just to make it look a little more aesthetically pleasing to Miller strategy battle game than say 40K or something like that, even though which is nice because then you could go between both games with it, but I obviously am more impartial to.
I don't even remember. It's been a while since we played 8th edition, but I know they have the 9th edition. I haven't even kept up with that. I think need to have Sal to answer that question. Maybe we'll try and ask him. But the line of sight is different anyways than Lord of the Rings. So you almost would, if you want to get the perfect balance, I feel, because even you could even get to the point, depending on what it is, of going towards Daniel's Marvel or Star Wars game, you would have to find. It's so hard for you to print terrain that you pretty much how you pick the Lord of the Rings because that's what you like. You kind of have to do that because at some point, otherwise, you get stuck trying to fit between so many different game systems out there. You kind of need to just pick with one, and if somebody likes it for something else or we like it for something else, yeah, we can port it in there, but it may not be perfect. So, your stuff matches really well to Lord of the Rings anyway. So I think.
Right, and that's the kind of the Patreons that I follow is the kind of the people that are making more Lord of the Rings
So the one
type.
thing, though, I should get this game. I've been wanting to get it because my wife wants to get it. She doesn't play these obviously the war games, but she'll play the board games with us. But there's a Lord of the Rings. I want to say it's like Journeys in Middle Earth or something. You have miniatures, and it's like almost a living role playing type game. But that one has miniatures. I wonder what that size train is because that'd be kind of cool if I get that. If you're able to take some of the train that you're printing out for MESBG and move it into that game to kind of make it a little bit more 3D.
Oh, for sure. I think that would definitely work. But then that also brings me to, I really enjoy open play and narrative stuff a little bit more than the match play, I think, because it gives you more room for error and it's more about, having fun and things like that. I will say the one thing that I do enjoy with the match play is creating competitive lists, right? Like, but that's the joy of that is creating a competitive list is more the fun for me than it is actually playing a matched game.
Yeah,
sometimes.
I know you can spend a lot of time. It's easy to quick switch your list up and change it and take this out, put this guy in and work out the strategy. The problem is when you're in the game, you can figure so much stuff out on paper, which is easy and it's less stress. But then once you're in the game, sometimes I'll find myself, which I like the open play too, because it allows me to do stuff that I probably wouldn't do in a matched play game, because when I get into a match playing game, it's more I'm trying so hard to figure out what you say you're doing 5 steps from now to figure out what I need to do now to prevent 5 steps from now. Whereas when we get into the narrative and the open play, sometimes it gets to the point where I don't really care. If I have Faramir and I have a bunch of knights of Minas Tirith, I'll charge him across the field. Why? Well, because he does it in the movie, he goes across the Pelennor fields, And yeah, it's a dumb thing, and he's not going to survive. It's a dumb strategy sometimes, but I'll do it just for the fun of it because it's cool to do the open play, the narrative that, hey, this is what I watched in the movie, or you remember something from a book, like, hey, this was in the book. Yeah, the guy died in the book anyway, but maybe he'll live for me when I do it.
Right, absolutely. And so while you were talking, I actually looked up the line of sight rules, right, within the shooting. And basically, you just have to be able to see a part of them, whether it's an arm or a face or anything like that, right? But then the other issue...
Does that include weapons, do you remember? Or does it say?
I do not believe... Because it's showing... at least in the rule book on the page 36, it's got... You can see the weapon of a hunter orc, but it's completely concealed except for his hand and a waving weapon, and so he cannot be targeted.
Yeah, you know what? You're right, because it's supposed to be dynamic poses, I believe. I thought, you know what? I bet that's what it is. So if it's a thing that, okay, obviously he's not going to stand there with his hand sticking out from behind a wall. That's where you use a little bit of your common sense. Like nobody's going to stand there with their arms straight up in the air, like, hey guys, shoot at my hand. It's right here. I'm waving at you. So then it must be the other games we played, because we have played a game. I remember with the weapon. I remember thinking how dumb that was. Like, come on, wow, because
that was with the vehicles too, right? Like, because there's not, I mean, there's siege engines within obviously Lord of the Rings, but like the vehicles, seeing like the tip of a gun of a tank in like 40K is.
I don't know. Maybe they had it something like that in the old version, or we were playing it wrong. But that is part of it. Does, now that I think about it, I remember Lord of the Rings. I just like the overall gameplay. I like the rules they have.
Right. And then even if you have issues with like line of sight, right? Like if you can only see ahead or something like that, then you at least have the in the way chart to kind of, bolster what potentially could happen, right? With, if there's just like flimsy things, you get a 3+ to go through in the way, right? And then you got walls and trees at a 4+, and then fortifications are at a 5+, right? and we always struggled with, okay, what's a flimsy wall and what's a fortified wall, right? Because that's a huge difference between a 3+ and a 5+. Well, enough of us rambling on for this episode. Let's try to keep some stuff for next time. I'd rather keep these episodes more shorter, better quality over quantity. So
Yeah,
I hope to talk about maybe some painting next time.
Yeah, that sounds good. I was painting while we're talking here, but I was painting a raptor, so maybe next time I'll pull out. I do have my Knights of Dolomroth that I got to get to, so that might be a good one for the next recording. Right. I'll paint that. We can talk about maybe some Pelennor Field stuff while I'm doing it, because that's what I'll be in the mood for.
Sounds great. Let's pick it up next time. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and have fun Middle-earth strategy battle gaming.